Well, good afternoon, everyone. By my watch, it says noon, so I think it's time that we can get started. I want to welcome everyone to our first webinar of our winter webinar series for 2018, where we will be looking at using shared book reading context to promote children's communication and empower caregivers. Our webinar today is going to be presented by Dr. Hedda Meadan, who's a Gold Stick Family Scholar and Associate Professor at the Department of Special Education there at U of I, and Yusuf Akamoglu, who is a researcher there at the Department of Special Education as well. They will tell you a little bit more about themselves, and when we finish kind of going over some introductory information. My name is Maria Maddox, and I am one of the consultants with the EI training program. And also on here helping us out is Alyssa Jones, who is a research specialist at the Early Intervention Training Program as well. We'll be manning the chat box and taking care of any technical assistance that you may need. So if you have any problems, you can give us a chat and we'll try to work that out for you. After today's webinar, when you've completed, you will get an email with a survey in it. Once you complete the survey, you will get a certificate of attendance within 24 hours of you completing the survey. You do have a short turnaround time to complete that survey, so please don't wait. Complete it as soon as you get that unique email. It should come from eitraining@illinois.edu. So if you don't get that email, check your junk box and so that you make sure that you do get it. Awesome. So webinars are awesome because you get to sit wherever you are and participate. And don't have to drive anywhere. Although, as I was sharing a minute ago, the sun is peeking out. It doesn't look too bad out here in Springfield. But one of the things is that we can't see you and you can't see us. So we do ask that you participate as much as possible. So we've got a few tools that will allow you to do that. The first tool is the chat box. So many of you have found at the bottom the chat box. So in here, please feel free to share comments, ask questions, ask any questions that you have. Our presenters may ask for you to share strategies or may ask for other comments as well. This is where you would go to do that. I'm just going to type a hi in here now and let folks know. All right. So that is one way, and if you want to make the chat box bigger or smaller, you can unhook it with those little lines there on the side. You can move it around so you can see more of the chat. As well, you can participate by putting on a little emoticon next to your name. So I'm going to put a little smiley face next to mine. So did Hedda and Yusuf. So these are the boxes right under your name. So there's 4 boxes right under your name. Also, skip that second box. The third box is a hand-raising tool. So our presenters may ask you to raise your hand if you have skydived. I don't know. And so you would click on that, and it would show your hand being raised. So and then then it'll go. You can click on it again, and it'll go away. The fourth box is our polling box, and we will be using the polls here a couple of times. So I'm going to show you in a moment what that will look like. And Yusuf, you want to talk about your agenda and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the first poll?
Yes. Hi everyone, we are very excited, especially because it's the first webinars of EITP this winter, so hopefully it will put high expectations for the next one. This is our agenda for today. I'm Hedda, and Yusuf is next to me, and in a second we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves. And then we're going to talk about the objective of today's session. We'll talk about the DEC, the Division of Early Childhood Recommended Practices. coaching parents and caregiver, very short kind of description, and most of the session will be about shared book reading and how we can use this specific context to promote communication with young kids. And we're going to talk about the specific strategy of naturalistic communication strategy. So this is our agenda for today. And I'll start with me. I'm Hedda. I'm a faculty here at the Department of Special Education, University of Illinois. My area of interest is really young kids with communication delays, and I feel my role is to find a way to empower families and give them tools so they'll be able to support their kids' communication. And I have many students, like my previous student, Yusuf, who just graduated, and he'll talk a little bit about himself.
Hi, everyone. This is Yusuf Akamoglu. I work as a researcher at in the Department of Special Education at Illinois. And my research interests also focus on family-centered practices, specifically parent-implemented interventions to support children's language and communication skills, and specifically to storybook reading and storybook reading interventions. So today I'm happy to be here and to talk about using storybook reading as an intervention context to support language and communication skills.
Okay, so I received some comments that you might not hear us a little bit, might be a little bit quiet, so we got closer to the mic, and hopefully you can hear us better. If not, just let us know and we'll talk louder. So Maria, you want to take this one?
I will. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there's another way of participating, and that is with the poll function. So under your name, that fourth box is a poll. So we have a question here about who do we have participating with us today. Let me throw that poll up there. Okay, and so you should be able to click the box and indicate what your role is here today. So find that fourth box and indicate A, B, C, D, or E. We'll give folks a few seconds to find it and to respond. These polls are really helpful if everyone could do their part to respond. That way we get a really good idea of who's present, and then there's other questions that our presenters will be sharing today as well. So let's see. I'm going to put other for myself because I do a lot of different things. All right, so let's see who we have in the room. So it looks like we have over half of the folks on the webinar are early interventionists, with about a third quarter being CFC staff. So and some administration. So that's good. Good. Thank you so much for that. We are going to ask a second poll just to delve a little deeper onto who our early interventionists are. So if you would also again respond to this, let us know what your primary role is if you are an early interventionist. Okay, we'll give you folks a few minutes to find that. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So it looks like we've got, let me move that over. Looks like we've got several speech-language pathologists, some OTs, some DTs, and a few service coordinators as well, and some assistants. So there's your audience for today, Hedda and Yusuf, and hopefully that will give you some good information to move forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. We see we have different people with different experiences, and we really, really hope this webinar will be interactive. So please ask any questions throughout. We'll try to answer throughout the session, but also we have a specific times for answering questions. So let's try to do it interactive so you can learn from us and we can learn from you, and we all learn and grow from this experience. Our objective for today is first to, I'm sure you all know about that, the importance of involving caregivers. We know from research that involving caregivers in the education of their kids it correlates to kids' outcomes in future life, different domains. So we really emphasize the involvement in caregivers. When we talk about caregivers, we talk about parents, grandparents, daycare, anyone who spend a lot of time with the kids and kind of promote their communication. We're also going to talk a little bit about the process of coaching, kind of very briefly. We had a different webinar last year about coaching, but kind of talking about what's coaching and why it's so important and how we can use coaching to involve caregivers in the whole process when we work with the families. The third objective is talk about shared book reading. This is one specific context in which we can involve parents and really teach them how to use different strategies to kind of create more communication opportunities. And we're going to talk about 3 naturalistic strategies that specifically can help in this context. So these are the objectives for today.
Okay, so there are a few things that we're going to talk about today. So one of them is key principles for providing early intervention services in natural environments. So the first one is the familiar people in familiar contexts. So that's one of the key principles, the first one. So according to the Office of Special Education Program Technical Assistant Community Practice Work Group, there are 7 principles. So the first one is the familiar people in familiar contexts, and that is infants and toddlers learn best through everyday experiences and interactions with familiar people like their parents, caregivers, siblings in familiar contexts, daily routines, so these are learning, this is a learning model based on relationship-based experiences and learning activities and opportunities that should be functional and based on child and family interest and enjoyment. So, for example, helping the family as an early interventionist or speech pathologist, helping the family how their tools and materials can be used or adapted, or helping caregivers engage the child in learning opportunities that allow for frequent practice and mastery of emerging skills in natural settings. The second one here is all families can enhance their children's development. And in here, with all means families from different backgrounds, meaning income levels, racial and cultural backgrounds, educational levels, skills levels, and living with various levels of stress and resources. So all families, regarding no matter what background they come from, have strengths and capabilities that can be used to help their child, and family, informally or formally, supports need to build on strengths and reduce stressors so they are able to engage with their children in mutually enjoyable interactions and activities. The third one is the primary role for us is to work with and support family members and caregivers in children's lives. And for example, we are not making family members to be like a mini therapist or a mini teacher or interventionist, but by providing information that we have as experts and by providing materials and emotional support, we need to enhance families' natural role as the people who foster their child's learning and development. They are the first contact with their children. Next is the early intervention process must be dynamic and individualized to reflect family members' learning styles and cultural beliefs and practices from initial contacts through transition. Family members have their own preferred learning styles, so that interactions must be sensitive and responsive to individuals. Each family's culture, spiritual beliefs, and activities, values, and traditions will be different from the you have, and so you should seek to understand, but not judge. And fifth, along with the fourth principle, IFSP outcomes, individualized family support plan outcomes, must be functional and based on children's and families' needs and they must be family-identified priorities. So the families have the say for what is priority for them or not. And we need to listen. We need to listen to families and believe in what they say regarding their priorities and needs. So having functional outcomes that build on a child's natural motivations to learn and do should match family priorities and strengthen naturally occurring routines so that we can enhance learning opportunities and enjoyment between the parents, the caregivers, and the children. Sixth, the family's priorities, needs, interests are addressed most appropriately by a primary provider who represents and receives team and community support. So there should be one consistent person to understand and keep abreast of the changing circumstances, needs, interests, strengths, and demands in a family's life. The primary provider brings in other services and supports as needed, assuring outcomes, coaching, or supporting the family to carry out the strategies and activities developed with the team members with the appropriate expertise. The primary provider also can develop a team based on the child and family outcomes and priorities, which can include people important to the family and people from community supports and services. And our last key principle here is the seventh one. Interventions with young children and family members must be based on explicit principles, validated practices, best available research out there, and relevant laws and regulations. And the practices that we are going to deliver must be based on and consistent with explicit principles. And providers should be able to provide a rationale for practice decisions. And it is very essential that practice decisions must be data-based or assessment-based, that we collect and gather through family and child assessments, and ongoing evaluation that are based on progress evaluations to see where the family and the child is at.
So this was the key principle for providing early intervention in natural environment. And if you want to see more information about that, you can see the website that we had in the previous slide, and they have much more information about each one of the items that Yusuf just described. So we have another poll, Maria?
Yes, we have another poll, and if you'll notice, that fourth box under your name changed from a letter to a check. So if you will go up there and just check whether you are familiar with DEC recommended practices, the check means yes, the X means no. So we'll give you a few minutes to figure that out. Okay, let's see how long it takes folks to respond. Waiting on a few more responses. All right, let's see what we've got. So the vast majority of folks are familiar with the DEC recommended practices, but there are a few that are not. So there you go.
Okay, so we'll give you just a brief overview of the DEC recommended practices, because this is what's guiding us when we talk about different practices. The Division of Early Childhood is part of the Council of Exceptional Children, and the DEC recommended practices were published, the last time they were published was 2014. We have here the website. If you want to go into this website that I'm just highlighting in yellow right now, this is the website where you get information about each practice and each strategy within the practice. And the DEC recommended practices are guidance about the most effective ways to improve learning and promote the development of young children with disability or at risk. And they are supported by research, values, and experience of many people who are working in the field and researchers. There are 7 topics within the DEC recommended practices, and each topic has practices that kind of break down to how they should look in the natural environment. The 7 topics are assessment, environment, family, instruction, interaction, teaming, and transition. We're going to talk specifically about the DEC related to families practices. So there are 3 themes within the DEC practices related to families. The first one is family-centered practice, and again, you see, I see Maria just posted the website, and you can also find it here on the slide. Family-centered practices are practices that treat family with dignity and respect and involve family members in acting on choices to strengthen the child, parent, and family functioning. So the idea here is that we really need to get to know the family, we need to understand their values, we need to understand cultural differences, and really collaborate. And I think kind of a key concept here is open communication, collaboration with family, and going around the family needs and strength when we develop some practices or working with them on a specific skill the child or the parents needs. So this is the first theme. The second one is family capacity building practices. This practice includes the participatory opportunities and experiences that we offer family to strengthen the existing knowledge and skills. So the idea here is to start with what the parents or caregiver really know, build on that, improve that, and promote that, and in addition, teach new skills and provide new knowledge. So we kind of building the capacity of the families and really empowering them, because when they have the skills and the knowledge, they feel more empowered. And I just want to mention the word empowered. Some people really don't like the word empowered because parents are already, or caregivers are already empowered. They have the power. But the idea is to kind of build their capacity more and help them understand what's going on and how they can support the kids' development. And the last thing within the DEC family practices are family and professional collaboration. These are practices that build relationship between families and professionals who work together to achieve agreed upon outcomes and goals. Again, building rapport with the family, not just talking, but also listening, and really thinking about how we can promote parents' knowledge, skills, build on their strengths, and help them with their needs. So every time we work with families, we have these 3 themes, but if you go into DEC website, you can see the specific practices that will guide these themes within the family practices. So I think now it's a good point to see if anyone have any question. We talked about key principle of working with families in natural environment. We talked about DEC recommended practices. These are just really background information that we assume most of you have, so it's just kind of a quick background. So if anyone has any question, we'll wait a minute or so, and if not, we'll just continue on.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody typing any questions so far, but there is a question about the handout. So as Alyssa has just pointed out, the handout that you have in your that was in the link is an abbreviated version. So it doesn't have all of the slides on there, but it has most of them. So just some of these slides build on top of each other. So if that's what's messing you up, that's what it is. Other than that, I don't see any questions.
Okay, so we'll keep going. So we talked about the background, and now we want to ask the question again. Maria created the ABC for you to answer. So how do you typically work with young children with delays or disability in their family? Work directly with the child and give family member homework, give family members strategy to work with their child, coach the family how to work with them. So which one of these strategies are most frequent used in your own practice?
And I have changed that 4th box to the letter, so go back up there and click that 4th box and indicate your choice of A, B, or C? We'll give folks a few seconds to think about it and respond. We ask that you all respond. We appreciate that. Okay, give a few more seconds as more responses are coming in. Okay. All right. So it appears that the majority of folks indicate B.
Yeah, but I'm sure this was not an easy question, because I have a feeling many of you are using all three in some way of combining them. There's no right answer here, of course, and it's really depending on the child, the family, the situation. I'm glad to see that we have a variety of responses, and I really hope that most people, I just see that Jessica just wrote a mixture of all three, and I really agree with that. Because, and I see also another response from Jennifer, that we really depend on the family, exactly. It's really kind of thinking about not just the family, the context, the specific skills, but these are the different options. We need to remember that there are different options of how we can work with the family. We don't have to use just one practice and one strategy, really working in what the family needs. And sometimes we need to work directly with the child because we need to model to the parents or the caregiver how to do some things. Sometimes we need to give them strategy and ask them to work with the child. And sometimes we need to coach them from the side and give them observation. So Jessica just asked a good question. What's the difference between giving a family member strategy and coaching? So I think we'll wait with this question for a few more minutes, because next we're going to define what is coaching and kind of the characteristic of coaching, but kind of in a very short, when you give the strategy, you just give them probably a handout or tell them what to do. When you coach, you need to go through a cycle of talking with them, observing them, modeling them, asking them to provide some reflection, and then providing feedback. So it's much more than just giving someone a list of strategies they should work on. Does this make sense? I hope so. If not, Jessica, just ask more further question about that. But we're going to talk more about coaching next. So I know we talked about empowering caregiver. We just want to mention it again and again. And if any one of you have a different terms we can use instead of empowering caregiver, because sometimes when I talk with caregivers, they don't like when I said we want to empower you, because they feel empowered already. So if anyone has another idea of how to kind of talk about this idea that we want to provide them more knowledge and more kind of practices they can use so they can promote their kids' development, let us know. We need to remember that caregivers are the experts on the children. They know the family values and beliefs and resources and needs. And we also know that both the law and our evidence-based practices tell us that caregivers need to be involved. The question is what name can we call it? Not empowering, because parents already or caregiver already have the power. And I see Diana said modeling. So this is one practice, yeah, modeling, but it's more than modeling. It's also giving the feedback and providing their self-esteem and confidence. So I think it's a little bit more than modeling, but please write more examples or more ideas so we can maybe use them. So another yes/no question. What is coaching? Even though we talked a little bit about that. Is it true? Is it a true statement? Coaching is a technique to get people to do what you want them to do. So X or check based on what Maria gave you.
Yes, I have changed it back to a check. So check means yes, X means no. So we'll give folks a few seconds to respond to that. Using that fourth box that's under your name, if you click on that, you'll be able to respond to the poll through that way. Okay. Let's post our responses here. So predominantly, everyone said, no, that's not true.
And I agree with that. We don't want people to do what we want them to do, right? So this is a false. It's not true. We want to work with them and see what they needed. And I just want to point out that someone, was it Sarah, said maybe instead of empowering, talking about expanding parents' toolbox. I like that. That's a very nice idea. Maybe we should use that. Yeah, and I like the idea of expanding because they already have many tools they're using. Ellen said affirm. Yeah, that's another good one. Good. Great. Keep giving us more idea. I like that. I'm looking about, Elizabeth said, communicating to them, I can tell you you're doing great, another way you can work with your child. Yeah, and this is another part, this is one component within the coaching. Yeah, thank you. So we talked about what coaching is, what it's not, and here is what coaching is. Coaching is not telling people what to do. It's giving them a chance to examine what they are doing in light of their intention. So really understanding kind of, the reflection is a very important piece within coaching. So people need to be aware of what they're doing and kind of expand on that, as someone just said, expand on the knowledge or expand what they're doing or improve that. So coaching is not telling someone what to do, is working with someone to help them understand what they're doing. Another yes/no question. What is coaching? Is it a true statement? In early intervention, coaching is empowering parents.
So again, mark your choices. The check means yes, the X means no, and we'll give folks a few seconds to put your responses in for that. I feel like I need some like Jeopardy music or something to kind of go along with it while we're waiting.
You want us to sing?
Well, you could, if you'd like.
Yusuf looks very scared.
Oh, let's see. I think I can put the responses up here. So, and this one, pretty much everybody said, yes, this is a true statement.
And yes, we agree. We talked about that, again, empowering or expanding the toolbox of the parent, or affirm, or part of modeling. Yeah, all of this is part of coaching. And here is the definition of coaching. We said true, of course. This is based on Rush and Sheldon. They have a book about coaching parents in early intervention, and this is what they kind of how they define coaching. An adult learning strategy in which the coach promotes the learning ability to reflect on his or her action as a means of determining the effectiveness of an action or practice and develop a plan to reflect and then use of the action in immediate and future situation. So Rush and Sheldon, we won't talk about it today, but they developed this coaching strategy, and they talk about, I see a comment, lose audio. I don't know. Maria, tell us if you lost anything audio.
No, we're good. I think it might be an individual issue, so we're going to deal with that.
Okay. So coaching is building on existing strategy of the caregivers and developing new strategies. They talk about specific characteristics of coaching, and the 5 characteristics they're talking about are joint planning, which is the time when the parent and the coach, or the caregiver and the coach, meet together and decide about goals and how the session will go and what they do exactly. Then the coach can observe the parent or the caregiver with the child. Then there's some action or practice, so modeling, showing parents or caregiver how to use different strategy or how to arrange the environment. After a caregiver work or play with the child for a little bit, then giving them an opportunity to reflect. And this is very, very important, because this is when the caregiver think about what did I did, maybe I did it, what did I do correctly, what I might want to change. And after the reflection comes the supportive and corrective feedback. So these are the 5 characteristics of coaching. We're not going to go into detail into them, but we want to make you aware that Rush and Sheldon developed a coaching practice indicators. It's a list of 14 statements that kind of help or guide practitioner and professional when they work with caregivers and thinking about different things they might want to do or emphasize during this coaching session with the caregivers. So thinking about acknowledging existing knowledge, being very non-judgmental with the parents or caregiver, identify target skill is what we talk about, joint planning, plan and action and practice. So I'm not going to go over each one of these because they're long. There are 14 of them, and we want to get into the shared book reading. So these are in your handouts, and we have 2 slides of these because there are 14 of them. We kind of highlighted and read some important words that we want to think about. The practicing, really strengthening the caregiver knowledge and skill, using question but not just yes/no question, really open-ended question that will promote reflection, promoting and encouraging a caregiver to reflect, providing feedback. And feedback, we always need to remember that we need to have supportive feedback, corrective feedback, provide new information, and again, remember the reflection piece that is very important to include in each session. So this is kind of we talked about coaching, we talked about the EC recommended practices, and this is another time for some discussion. I see there's some question, and I hope Maria and Alisa will help us go through them. So we're going to look at them for a few seconds and then respond. So please ask more questions, write it, or comments in the chat box so we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think the questions that we've had so far, you've either addressed or they are technical questions. So unless anyone is typing right now, we could interrupt if you start and they post it. But I think we can go ahead and move forward.
Sounds good. I thought just that Sarah said reflecting for parents and professionals are very important. And I agree that we need to have reflection not just for the caregivers, but also for us as professionals. So when we're done with the session with the parents or a family, it's important for us to reflect on what we did and maybe what we will change next time. So the reflection is for everyone involved in the process. And Sarah is agreeing with us, so yes. Reflective practice, yes, exactly. Okay, moving on from talking about the background to talking about parent-implemented intervention. Parent-implemented intervention was recognized as evidence-based practice, which means that there's enough research that support using parent-implemented intervention. I know the name is parent-implemented intervention, but it's a lot about it's caregiver-implemented intervention. That the parent is directly using the strategy with their own child to increase positive learning opportunities and acquisition of important skills. So this is evidence-based practice, and we also know that parent or caregiver can learn new practice and new strategy and can implement them correctly. So again, going back to expanding parent-caregiver toolbox and giving them more tools that they can use with their own kids, we know that they can practice it more often than the 1 hour a week that service provider go into the home. We know they can practice it in different contexts, in different settings. So the child could have many more opportunities to learn new things and practice them. So giving the tools to the parents is very beneficial, and it's not just because we think so. We also have a lot of research that supports that.
Okay, now this is Yusuf again. I'm going to talk about shared storybook reading as an intervention context. So the question here is, why shared storybook reading? We all know that, and we probably, if we have kids, we all know that we read storybooks to our children, whether we buy them or check them out from libraries. We know that there are certain ways that we can use to support parent-child interactions in storybook reading. So first of all, storybook reading is a naturalistic routine. It is an activity, it's a social activity in which caregivers, parents can promote not only cognitive skills or social engagement, but also language and communication skills. I will take just a few seconds. I'm having a technical problem on my own computer, so this will be probably just 30 seconds to get there. Okay, I'm back here. So, and number two here is the quality instead of quantity. What we focus on here is so shared storybook reading is a broad term, first of all. And underneath this broad term, we have dialogic reading, we have interactive reading, and we have read out loud. So when you look at interactive reading or shared storybook, there's a shared thing, and what is shared here is the interaction. So the caregivers can encourage interaction of their children with disabilities throughout the storybook reading, so that instead of quantity, we focus on the quality, and that makes the shared storybook reading a suitable intervention for improving social communication skills of young children with disabilities. And I want to point out that we know from the literature, and you might have heard about these, that shared storybook reading promotes early literacy skills as well. But in this webinar, we are mostly going to focus on the social communication context and how we can support social communication skills of young children with disabilities through shared storybook reading. Next, we have again why shared storybook reading, because this is the interaction, the practitioner's roles are well outlined, especially in the Dec Recommended Practices. So it says, practitioners will assist others in the child's life, family members, other caregivers, siblings, peers. These are all people who are in the child's life. So in learning sensitive and responsive ways to interact with the child and promote the child's development. So you as practitioners, like developmental therapists or a speech-language pathologist or any other professionals who work with parents, you can teach caregivers how to promote their children's communication skills and how to sustain positive interactions during specific shared storybook reading. When it comes to children with disabilities and their interaction, their engagement with book reading, there are some challenges that we encounter as adults, either as therapists, practitioners, or parents. So these are due to the delays and the challenges that children with disabilities have in their language and in their social communication development. So some of these challenges can be listed as having joint attention, meaning focusing on the same thing, having the same focus. The parent and the child should have the same focus, but this could be one of the challenges. Or reciprocal interactions. Especially when we work with children with disabilities as an adult, as a parent, you could see that it might not be very reciprocal. It might be one way, the parent or the adult providing the interaction or reading the book and not making an interaction. So this could be one challenge that we interfere with the child's participation in book reading. Again, another thing is responding. And for responding, a child needs to have some communication skills. It doesn't have to be spoken language. It doesn't have to be verbal language. For responding, a child could point out to a picture in a book or can gesture, can reach out to turn a page. Again, similarly, requesting to turn a page or requesting to be modeled for language in a picture, in a story, and making a comment about what he or she sees in the picture, in the story. All these things are challenges that children with disabilities have and that may interfere in their sustained interaction with their parents while they're reading storybooks. Yes, we have Patricia saying, I love sharing various ways in which to use books with children. And she says many times parents feel reading the book is the only way to use one. it really opens up their options when we discuss other ways to share in book time. Yes, definitely. So that's what we are going to focus on. Like how can we make this more interactive, and how can we promote social communication?
So maybe you can give us some more ideas. So what do you share with parents? How they can, because Teresa also mentioned that parents feel like they have to read books. And many parents tell us we don't feel comfortable reading books because the kids don't stay on our lap for long enough, the language is too high for the kids. So other ideas how we can use the books in order to promote interaction and promote communication. So yeah, give us more ideas here. That will be great.
So shared storybook reading and naturalistic teaching. So how can we use shared storybook reading as a context to use naturalistic language and communication strategies? So caregivers can use book reading as a regular opportunity, and we always forget that it is a context that gives us an opportunity to embed naturalistic communication strategies. For example, allowing children to choose books, like this is a very simple example. Allowing children to choose books gives a parent an opportunity to teach new skills, such as pointing. Which book the kid wants. He or she may point out to a book, or the parent may label the name of the book. And also, choice making increases the chances that the parent will capture the child's attention and motivate him or her to produce a target behavior, which is, for example, maybe pointing or labeling something.
And we have great examples that people here shared about reading books. So it's using pictures. You really don't have to, Teresa, as Jessica said, you really don't have to read the entire book, which is completely correct. Yes. You can use the pictures on the book. You can use the practice of moving or turning on the pages. You can, of course, following the child leads and the book and not necessarily going page by page. Yes, that's correct. Pointing to picture, Yusuf just mentioned that, exploring physical pages or even how to hold a book and which direction we start a book. I know I'm speaking a different language, so we start from left to right instead of right to left. So these are different options to look at.
One of Ikra says, please say more about overcoming the challenges of short attention and power struggle. Yes, we are going to cover that when we come to the reading techniques. How can we use reading techniques or prompts to support child engagement and child participation? We will talk about that. But yes, once a child shows an interest in a book or illustration or the story itself or character in a book, the parent could follow the child's lead by responding to any verbal or non-verbal communicative exchanges or initiations. For example, the child says train, and then the mom says, yes, this is a train, acknowledges. Or the child points to something, and then the mom acknowledges that, or the dad acknowledges that. Yes, we do struggle. We actually, in our research too, we observed that the parents struggled with the reading because they thought that reading word by word or page by page is very critical. But we try to teach them and support them that this is not the only way. It should be interactive. It doesn't have to be page by page or word by word. That might be very boring for especially children with disabilities.
Wow, you have great examples here. Texture books, exaggerating sounds or face expression, following the child lead, using a light during dark, under the cover maybe. So making it as a fun activity. It's not kind of only educational where we sit next to a table and read a book.
Yes, we are going to talk about this, and I'm glad that you started to tell me about what I'm going to present. So next we will see all of these things, all of the comments that are here will be reflected in our presentation in the next coming slides.
But keep going. Tell us more about books that you know that really encourage communication that you have experienced with.
You can also tell us about your favorite storybooks. We'd love to hear about those because I'm really interested in a collection of storybooks. Okay, so how can we teach caregivers, parents, to increase children's participation during storybook reading? So what can we do? What can parents do? And how can we teach the parents to use certain strategies, techniques to increase child engagement and participation? So again, child engagement is the child is engaged while reading, and participating means responding, commenting, initiating something while reading the book. So there are three main strategies, three main components that we are going to focus on. The first one is going to be setting the environment. The second one, picking books of interest. Some of you mentioned those, and using reading techniques. Again, some of you mentioned using certain techniques, and one of you asked what can we do, and we'll talk about that. So again, for many children with disabilities, it is very necessary that we use certain strategies to provide additional support to facilitate child engagement and participation. So setting the environment. So here, as you can also see in the pictures, number one thing is to design a specific space for reading, and this space should be arranged as a learning environment to be conducive to shared reading activities. So as a parent, as a practitioner, you can guide the parent, you can guide a caregiver how to create a comfortable environment so that a child, for example, with autism spectrum disorder is not distracted, or at least the goal should be to minimize distractions, which we'll talk next. And so for that, we usually guide parents to have a comfortable environment and to create that comfortable environment by using certain specific visual and physical cues to clarify that there are reading expectations. You can see in the picture on the right, Hedda, can you point out to this picture on the right here? Yep. See, this is just an example, an image from the internet, and you can find many other images. There's read, where the child may associate that word with the environment. Oh, when I see that word, that means that space is designed for me and for my caregiver to come here, pick a storybook, and read together. And there are storybooks outlined in the shelves. So the child, again, associates that if there are storybooks, there is a space for me. I will come to this space with my caregiver at certain times and read books. And this will be a comfortable area for me so that I am not distracted. And especially for children with disabilities, physical disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, or sensory issues, there are certain seating alternatives. So as a practitioner, you can look for those. You can search for alternative seating arrangements, and you can allow the parents to explore those, and you can suggest what they can use and what you think their children need in terms of seating arrangements. Some parents prefer to read on the floor. Some parents prefer to read on a couch. We had, in our research, we had a parent who would always read with her 5-year-old child with cerebral palsy on the floor, but on the other hand, we had another parent, and she always wanted to sit on the couch with her child with autism, and she was 3.5, and their preference was to sit on a couch, and that was comfortable for them. The second one, as we continue with setting the environment, is to limit distractions. So the environment should be free of visual or auditory distractions, so that therefore turn the TV off. The TV should not be in that environment, or even if it is in that environment, it should be out of view, so out of sight. The child cannot see where the TV is because that is a distraction. The child may want to watch TV or any other screens, tablets, phones. They should be out of sight. And preferably, if this is possible, use a windowless corner or face away from the window so that the child does not look out the window, because that could also create another distraction. And if there are any highly preferred items, objects such as toys or snacks, they should not be within the reading environment, but they should be out of sight. So you can obviously communicate those and teach parents how to create a distraction-free environment by going through these checklists. The last one in the setting the environment is to establish a routine. This is especially important for children with autism, but also important for any child. So the parents, we can teach parents to make book reading a part of the daily routine. Certain families prefer book reading at nighttime before bed. Certain families read multiple times a day, and this depends on the family's priority and preferences and needs and their schedule, obviously. We had parents in our research before who will tell us, who will report that they will read multiple times a day, and they will mostly enjoy, some will enjoy reading during the day, some will enjoy reading during night. Those who will enjoy reading during the day will report that it is more enjoyable because the child is still awake and has more energy to participate, whereas if you go and read, for example, during nighttime before bedtime, the child is getting ready for the bed and it might not be as interactive. But of course, this is not true for every family, and I'm not generalizing this, I'm just reporting what was reported to us. What else do we have here, Hedda? Do we have any questions?
There are so many. Well, in a few minutes, you're going to talk about how choosing books, and there are many, many examples which I'll share from what I noticed. But there's so much, so many ideas here.
So Barbara said, I like to pair toys with books. Yes, and I have done that too in my practice. These are called sometimes props. So props, like depending on what books you are reading or what book the caregiver is reading with the child, it might be a very good idea to pair certain toys, objects with the book so that the child can have a connection between the real life, real-time objects and toys and the characters or the stories in the book or the illustrations in the book. Go ahead, Hedda.
Well, actually, Maria.
Yes, so it looks like we have another poll, and you'll notice that fourth box changed back to a letter. So if you will read the question and click on the appropriate response that you feel is correct, and we'll give folks a few seconds, not minutes, that would be really long, to respond. Okay. We got a few more responses. I think you're going to like this. Let's see here. Here's our responses. So pretty much everybody said keeping the toys in the reading area is not setting the environment example.
We just wanted to make sure you're listening, so this was a test.
It's a very tricky question, but we highlighted, we underlined the not. So which one is not setting the environment component. So we had three components: structuring the environment, limiting the distractions, establishing a routine. But again, keeping the toys in the reading area could be very distracting, and we do not always prefer that unless you prefer or unless you need to use toys or objects as props to make connections between the story in the book and the real objects. So another thing that may help a lot with sustaining interaction and having children participate in book reading is allowing them to pick books of interest. These are just examples of books, and you might be familiar with some of these storybooks because these are commonly and popular storybooks out there that families purchase or check out from libraries to read to their children, and you might also probably have some of those and maybe you are sharing with the parents that you're working with.
And you had many other examples. Many of you said you like the Brown Bear book that you mentioned, the pretzel book, which I am not aware of.
Shows the yoga positions. Interesting.
Yeah. Different people mentioned different types of books, so more kind of interactive book with different scents, like smells or textures. Someone mentioned about the one with the Cheerios, where you put the Cheerios in the book. There are books with, you can press different things with sound. So more interactive book, especially for young kids, those who have more difficult time sitting for maybe a longer time. So many examples, many books. There are other books that someone mentioned that talking about environment, that their daughter really like specific blankets. So thinking about the safety, the kind of sensory that they are into. What other books did they mention? Go Away, Big Green Monster, different things that can you do with the book, like peekaboo, or just play with the book as a peekaboo way. So it's not just reading, you can do much more than reading.
Some of those books that are mentioned, like body parts or yoga positions, and you can find much more. They're like dancing books where you can also promote physical activities, or through the physical activity that is characterized in the book, you can also promote social communication. You can label body parts so that the child who has a disability can hear about the body parts and can probably model them and learn about them.
And Maria, I think, posted few links of you can get books from the clearinghouse. Maria, maybe you can post those again, because they are far away in the discussion. So where to get the books, or borrow books, and libraries and
Yeah, and Champaign Public Library, for those who live in Champaign-Urbana area, has great storybooks, and I've checked out so many of them from the library. And so when we pick books of interest, there are two steps as an adult or as a parent we can do. First, as a caregiver, for example, we need to identify the child's general interest in terms of their likes and dislikes. What do they like? What topics? What stories? What characters do they like? And what do they not like? We hope that we don't want to give a choice or read a book that the child is not interested in. Otherwise, it's going to be super hard for us to maintain interaction or maintain participation or engagement. But if the child likes the storybook, or the story in the books, or the pictures, or the characters, the child will be more motivated to be engaged throughout the book reading. And actually, if you just, I need to mention a few more things in the first item. When we talk about the likes and dislikes and how we, depending on what they like and dislike, we need to check out books from the library or purchase books, right? So, or borrow from friends. So when we do that, when we gather books, when we get books, here's what we need to pay attention to. The books should be age appropriate. We don't want to read a 2-year-old storybooks that are appropriate for 5-year-olds, because the vocabulary or the language or the story might be too advanced for the child. So the age-wise, they should be appropriate for the child. Second, we want to pay attention whether the books that we have, if we have multiple books, that whether they have contain similar number of words on each page. We don't want books that are too wordy for a 2-year-old or 3-year-old child or 3.5-year-old child. And the pages, if one page has 1 word, 2 words, and then the second page has like hundreds of words, then this is not very appropriate for the child. And the books that we are going to choose for birth to 3, birth to 4-year-old children, again, they should include pictures that illustrate story content, and those pictures intend to foster dialogue between the parent and the child. So if we pick these kind of books, they will promote child responsiveness, and they will help us in teaching specific vocabulary, and they will help us in fostering child participation in book reading. So again, age-appropriate books, books that contain a similar number of words on each page, and include pictures that illustrate story content. And when the parent sits down, they go to their book reading area and they want to read books. They should provide the child with 2 choices of storybooks, so that the child has to say which one he or she wants to read. If they do that, they have independence, they have autonomy, and that will make it more likely for the child to participate, because they have more motivation to read, because they are interested in the storybook they pick. And even the kids with autism, they will be able to choose books, and especially once they get used to the choices, you will see that even if they are nonverbal, they will point out to the book that they want to read. So do you have any questions for us so far? And you have probably a lot of comments and both the storybooks that you recommend.
So there were two questions before.
Yeah, there was two questions. One was, could you talk about environments that are really, really small? Like for, you know, when families are trying to find a place to make their reading kind of area, but if they live in a really really small locations. That was one question. And then there was another question about introducing this to families in a way that doesn't indicate that the families may not know how to use books.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so for the first question, that is actually, this could be true for a lot of families. Not every family has a lot of space in their houses. If they have a small area, probably they won't be able to have a designated area, which is permanent in a corner, for example. But what they can do is, if the child and if they like to read books on a couch, they should at least provide the same area. So if there's one corner, they should be consistent with that corner. It doesn't have to be a designed or designated area, but at least when they go and read books, they should always choose the same area so that that area is predictable for the child. And again, what makes a storybook reading as a whole context is that it is very structured, both in terms of its area and its context, and it is predictable. So we want everything to be consistent and structured, both the area itself and the book reading. So if at least they can choose the same area over and over, and if they can display books in that area before they go to read, even if it is small, I think that will help with child participation.
There was something related about the positioning of the child. If it's better to have the child on your lap or just in front of you. And I think it really depends on the child and the situation. Kids who cannot sit, sometimes it's better to have them sit on your lap so you can kind of hug them and hold the book. You can also put them in front of you and hug them with your legs. So it really depends on what you're working on. If you need to do hand over hand for prompting or reaching or touching, it depends if you feel more comfortable to do it when you're behind them or in front of them. It depends if you're working on eye contact, and it's obviously better to have the child sit in front of you. So the goal of what you're working on and the child characteristic and also the child comfortably what they prefer, this is what should guide you, but it really depends on how to sit the child. So again, joint, eye contact in front. If the child run all the time, maybe on your lap and hug them. Many different options. There were other questions.
The second question that Maria mentioned was how do we introduce that relates to the coaching to the coaching piece. Again, we want to approach parents in a way that we show and we appreciate that they have strengths and skills. We want to first understand and identify how they read books. We may want to first observe, and we may want to point out for room for the room for improvement. So we can always mention there's room for improvement, and you can mention how you as a practitioner prefer to read or how you suggest to read, and hopefully the parents are open to listen. And it is also about like how you build rapport with the family so that they appreciate what you suggest. But again, first understand and identify and observe how they read, and second, kindly show that there is room for improvement, and some of the practices that they can use should be listed slowly and item by item instead of giving all this information together.
There's another question about the number of words in a page. And I think this is another depending question. Sometimes you don't even read the words in the page, so you just point to the pictures, or you just work on preference or identifying body parts or animals. So there's no right answer for that. You don't want to have too many words if you're reading that, but you want to have some words if you're working on specific words. So it really depends on what's the goal.
And some books, when you check them out or when you purchase them, you will see that they say what age appropriate they are. They will say 3 to 5, appropriate for 3 to 5, or appropriate for 2 years old, or toddlers. So some of them, they have those labels, so you can also look at those.
And just one point that Ellen mentioned is using books with the language of the child in the home. So she talked about a few books in Spanish that she worked with family who speak Spanish in the home. So really be kind of sensitive to the language that the kids are working when you bring books to the family and talking with them about that. So I think we're going to move on to the next one, and we'll have another stop for more question in a few slides.
So there are certain reading techniques. You can call them reading prompts as well. It's up to you. I call them reading techniques. So these techniques can help refocus children's attention on the book, provide feedback about their comments, and give them opportunities to connect the stories to their own lives. And we categorize them, and we have adapted those in a way that are applicable in book reading. So there are 3 categories. One of them, the first one, is before reading techniques, which is presenting the book. The second one, during book reading techniques, praise, acknowledgement statements, and attention getters. And the third category is after book reading techniques, which is a closer question, and we are going to go one by one. So let's see. The first one is before book reading techniques. So after we provide the choice and the child takes what book he or she wants to read, we present the book. We introduce the book. For that, say the title and the author of the book to the child before you begin to read. And after you read the author and the title, ask the child at least one question to build the child's interest in the storybook. This question could be very simple, and there are some examples that we have on the slide. For example, you can say this book's title is Say What? And written by Angela Di Terlizzi. That's it. You don't have to say anything else. At least we want to show them that there's this way you can promote print awareness. And for the initial question, what do you think this book is about? Do you think this book is about animals or the cars? You look at the cover, and if the cover has bears, you may frame your question like this. Do you think this book is about bears or cars? So that it is more likely to get the response bears from the child, because he or she can also see the bears on the cover, so it's easier. And the response could be pointing, vocalizing, sound, verbal or nonverbal. And the during book reading technique are specifically designed to maintain engagement and participation throughout book reading. So while you are reading the book, provide some feedback, acknowledgement, encouragement statements, so that the child knows even the smallest attempt is acknowledged by the parent, or even the smallest attempt to turn a page, to point out on a picture, or to say something, or to comment on a picture or a story gets appreciated, or gets acknowledged, so that the child is encouraged to do more of these, which is kind of reinforcement. We want to reinforce, we want to praise them for what they do in participation. Second one is attention getter. Some of you mentioned, like, how can we get attention of the child? Because especially children with disabilities, they get distracted. And to minimize those distractions and to get them back in the book reading, we can use attention getters. And these attention getters are using, for example, using verbal and nonverbal, or a combination of these to focus the child's attention on the book. So with the child, with one of the families that work with, they had a child with autism, 3.5, and she was distracted a lot, especially at the beginning of our research project. But we taught the parents how to say, look at something that the child might be interested in the book. For example, they would read the book, a book about pigs, and the child was really interested in pigs. And she will say, look how the pigs are eating pizza, or look at the big pigs, or look at the pizza, in a very enthusiastic tone, so that the child gets turn her head and then looks at the picture, looks at this story, and then there we go from all of that. And there are some examples listed on the slide here. And after book reading, before we close the book and we say, okay, let's put this book away, we want to ask one question to connect to maintain their interest and to connect what we have in the story or the characters in their own lives. So let's say the book was about dogs, and the family has dogs. They say, well, this book was about dogs. What about our dog? What is his name? Or what did our dog do at the park? What did our dog eat today? Questions that are simple, but that make a connection between the story itself and the real life experiences that the child had in the past.
So we have question, but we're going to skip that, and I just want to emphasize that many of you shared a lot of resources through the chat, and there are many websites and ideas, and thank you again. These are great, and hopefully you can get to all these websites even after the webinar is done. We want to make connection again to the DC recommended practices related to children and social communication and storybook reading. So again, the DC recommended practice kind of emphasized the communication development of kids through their families.
Hedda, before we go on social communication, one last thing about after book reading techniques is some of the books, some of the children will not be able to go through the entire book, and that should not be our goal. Our goal should be to promote communication and engagement, but if the child can go only through 5 pages, or if we had a chance to interact them through 5 pages, that might be enough, and we may want to build off of that. If today it was 5, tomorrow we may try 6, so that they at least know that there's an end to the book. They just don't leave when they want to leave the book reading time.
So now we kind of are switching gear a little bit and just talking about a few specific naturalistic strategies that we can use to promote social communication skills. So social communication skills refer to the skills needed to communicate and engage with others. We put the picture of the twins because we were thinking about I'm sure many of you saw the videos of the twins communicating with each other next to the refrigerator with no words. So communication is much more than talking. It could be nonverbal communication. And we know that many young children who have autism and other developmental disability or at risk have social communication skill deficits. And we also know that our role as adults is to promote and be responsive to the kids in order to promote their social communication. So we include here a few strategies, naturalistic teaching strategies to encourage more communication within the context of book reading.
So the primary goal of the naturalistic teaching with children who have communication difficulties is to increase their use of functional communication. Functional communication so that they can have communication exchange and interaction with their peers and adults. And this happens in the natural context, which are the daily routines of their families. And these strategies are based on the applied behavior analysis techniques, which means they can be used to prompt and reinforce target behaviors. And the common features of these naturalistic teaching strategies are using direct and natural reinforcement, focusing on functional skills, using a variety of materials or a variety of storybooks, and following the child's interest in book reading and while reading the book. And so again, one of these naturalistic activities is shared storybook reading. So we have 3 strategies. They are modeling, man model, and wait time. We're going to go one by one that you can teach parents how to use. So the first one is modeling. So modeling is a simple strategy in which used to demonstrate to teach your child new words, phrases, signs, or behaviors you want your child to imitate. At first, modeling sounds simple, but just demonstrating something new, and it is simple, but there are some important aspects in it where to make it more successful. So in order for modeling to be successful, there are 3 things that you need to or a parent needs to go through, and you can teach the parents to use those. The first thing, there should be joint attention. So the parent needs to establish joint attention. The parent and the child needs to have a focus on the same thing. So if they're reading the book, and if the child is looking on the left page where there's an illustration there, and the mom is looking or trying to ask a question on the right page of the book, there's no joint attention. So the mom or the dad should follow the child's lead and focus on what the child is focused on. So if there's a picture of a truck in where the child is looking at, I will go off of that truck, and then that is the joint attention. Second, I will present my model. I will say truck. I will point on the truck. And third, that means I want the child to imitate what I said or to point to what I said. So I will wait. I will give the child some time to get a response. So teach the parents to wait at least 2 to 3 seconds. And then if the child responds, the parent should provide feedback. The child points to truck, yes, truck. The child says truck, yes, truck. Or can expand on it, yes, blue truck. We acknowledge, we show that they are doing what we want them to do.
Skip the question.
And we skip the question, and we have man model. The purpose of this strategy is to elicit responses. Similar to modeling, we have similar steps. First, there should be joint attention. Second, there should be the parent should present the strategy. And third, the parent should wait. And fourth, again, provide feedback. So now if we go back, there are 3 forms of man model. 1, open-ended question. Where is the gorilla going? Or what is this dog doing? And the second form could be a choice question. Is this a truck or a train? Or it could be amend, which means a request, a direction. Say pizza, or tell me what you see. These are all 3 different forms of man model. And again, there should be joint attention. And again, present the man model. Wait at least 2 to 3 seconds to receive a response from the child. And if you receive a response, then provide feedback. If you do not receive a response, then re-establish joint attention, represent your man model, wait again. If you do not receive the response again, then you provide the response. This is a truck, or the gorilla is walking. Wait time is used in conjunction with man model and modeling to especially have the child some time to process the question or the model, and then to produce a communication act. And for that, again, 2 to 3 seconds, but it will be 2 to 5 seconds as well, providing the child with a model, a man, and then or attention-getting phrase or gesture. We know, especially from the literature and research, it is very difficult for parents to wait. And for us adults too, it's not only parents. We do not have time. We are impatient. You probably will agree on that. But it is very critical that we give time to our children to process what we said and to giving time for communication.
Okay, this is our last slide. So this is a good opportunity for all of you to see if you have any questions. We have only a few more minutes. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. And if you have any other resources, I know that Maria and Elisa said they kind of try to put all the resources that you share with everyone on a document and maybe share with everyone who participates, because there are many good ideas and websites that could be shared. So just putting it all together and kind of finishing our session, our webinar for today. So we talked about caregiver training and coaching and how important it is to involve caregivers in their kids' intervention, caregivers who are involved are invested. They feel they're more confident when they know more information, and they can really use the strategies that we teach them in everyday setting and everyday context. So the kids have many more opportunity to learn. One context to use that and coach and train caregiver is the shared book reading context. As we mentioned, it doesn't have to be only before bedtime, and it doesn't have to be reading the whole book. It's just something that the book is a context which allow interaction and promoting communication via different strategies.
And what makes shared storybook reading a unique context for this intervention is that it is very structured and it is predictable, not only for the child but also for the parent. The parent knows that there's a story here, and they may repeatedly read the same book, and it is okay, and it is also suggested, and that makes this context structured and predictable.
Just make sure it's enjoyable and fun. This will be a good motivation for learning. We talked about the reading technique before, during, and after that caregiver can use. We talked about naturalistic teaching strategy, more specifically modeling, man model, and the time, wait time. And all of this will kind of hopefully lead to empowering parents or building capacity within families, and also expanding their toolbox and making sure that they feel confident that they can help their kids develop and improve their skills. Any question or comments? Maria, did you see anything that we missed?
I have not seen any questions. I've seen a lot of wonderful resources and ideas shared, websites. So yeah, I don't see any questions though. So I think we may be good. You still have a few minutes, folks, if you do have questions that you want to post. But in the meantime, I'm going to go over some final things. I want to first thank Hedda and Yusuf for what a great presentation. This was really informative, and I want to thank all of our participants for really participating and sharing all these great ideas. As I said in the very beginning, at the end you will get an email from the EI training program that contains a survey, and you need to complete that survey within 24 hours, or your certificate will be be sent to you within 24 hours of completion of that survey. If you did observe as a group, you will need to have access to that survey so that you can complete your certificate. So make sure that if you are, that the email is shared. And with that being said, I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think we can conclude our webinar for today, and I do ask everyone to check back at the EI training program. Our next webinar that we have, let me see real quick, it's next week at 12 o'clock, focusing on motor. It's more than that, but that's what I have in mind is something about motor. So great. And so thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.